right, good morning, students, or afternoon, wherever you may be. It's going to be a fairly quick lecture this week. Some of this stuff is things that you've gone over. This week, we're going to focus on getting to know the grantor. So the organization that you're requesting funds from. All right. So whether that is a foundation, whether it's a government agency, a private individual, whatever it may be, things you need to know about them to make sure that you're requesting from the right place. One of the hardest things to do is to match your needs, what you're doing. And I know I've said it a few times over the course of the term so far, but matching your needs and what your program or your project is, what your goals are to the right funding. Making sure that you have the right funding and asking from the right grantor is going to be where your success is measured at as far as your success that you grade. All right. So there'll be others that grade your success in different ways. You know, the grantor will want to see certain milestones. They'll want to see budget reports. Those looking from the outside will want to see, if you can actually do it. You will measure your success and if the mission that you had in mind when you began planning out your program or your project is accomplished. Once mission is accomplished, that's when, you can then begin to realize that you did everything you were supposed to do and you got everything right. You may make mistakes along the way, but those are fixable. One thing about this is, for the most part, your mistakes are fixable until the point where you submit your grant proposal. And once you do that, it's very important that you did all the homework and you know what you were supposed to do and that the grantor is the right one. So let's go ahead and get started with this. Like I said, it's not going to be long. Some of you may be making preparations for the storm. Others may be viewing this at a time where it's the most convenient with everything going on. But we're going to talk about what the eligibility requirements are for what you're doing. So what's the type of organization? What type of restrictions do they have as far as the area and location? And what field of work is specific to what you're doing? First, your type of organization. Are you a nonprofit, a business, an individual asking for the funds? Are you an educational institution, some type of government entity? That will be paramount to, making sure that you're asking from the right place. Some will only give to nonprofits. Some, their goal is to help small businesses. Others are based in educational. If you'll refer back to a few lectures ago, we talked about different types of grants, or educational grants and grants for businesses and stuff. And some of those are specifically for that. So you need to know, who does this grantor work with? And am I the right type of organization for them? Then your geographic restrictions. All right. So do they only work in certain states, certain regions, or in certain cities? Some of these only work in certain cities because that's what they do, how they're set up. Their funding is meant for that city. A way to think about it and why some of these restrictions exist. If you consider that, your program is meant for a specific area, a lot of times when these grantors develop and build the funds for their grant, they do so with the sole purpose of helping their local communities. So it may be important to look at your local community, see what grants are there that will help in the community that match what you're doing. And then, of course, they want to see what type of area of industry you're in. What's your focus? Are you working with technology? Is this education? Those type of things. That lines up with the other three. Healthcare in rural areas of Alachua County. You're going to request someone who, first, you want grantors that work with healthcare. And then you want to see if there are any that have restrictions outside of their main area. So they may not give to programs within Alachua County. They may only work in certain areas. All right, I'm back. We should be back up and running. Had a little bit of a technical glitch there. But keep in mind that you need to know these pieces as you do that. Then the next thing is going to be funding priorities. All right. Does the grantor have priorities of who they fund to? Once again, certain areas they look at. Do they give to climate change initiatives, social justice or social equity, those type of things? Do they look at socioeconomic status of the region they're giving to or the area? They may only fund innovation, that's something that's going to improve society. A new program, a new project, a project that develops new technology, those type of things. And then some are community development. Now, for the most part, what we're doing for class is going to be some type of community development that may have other pieces in it, but centered around working within the community. I want you to kind of cut your teeth on those, and then later on, if you ever are in a position where you write a grant, you'll have an idea of what working in a small area, and then you can expand from there. Sometimes it's hard if you learn the big concepts and have to filter all that down to a small concept. But when you learn a small concept and you can build upon that, then you understand each thing that goes into it a lot better because you learned it in pieces and you can then work your way out. So certain types of projects. Well, if it's a pilot project, first time it's ever been done, we want to see if this is something that will take off. That can be done in other places. That happens quite a bit where you have a community pick for a pilot project. Some of those pilot projects are reading initiatives. Some of those are improvements in low-income housing, projects that are meant to work with infrastructure in areas that may not receive funding like your bigger metropolitan areas do. So maybe you're working with a community or a small town and you're working on getting their project. It would be important to know who works within those. Some are research studies. Now, it's not uncommon for research studies to be tied to other projects. The research study can be built into it, and maybe as part of the study, they're starting the project. So know the specifics of that. Is it a full research study, or is there something else that you can get funding for? And then the research study builds into it, and you can make those separate pieces for the funding. Capital projects, capacity building, those type of things. Those are projects that work different than programs. Notice all those are about, for the most part, they're increasing something there. Capital projects, which means that's a large expense. Most of you know what a capital expense is. So your capital project is growing something. It's money that's being spent and adding on to capacity in certain areas, those type of things. So who are their target beneficiaries? Focus on groups that they may be low income populations, children, minorities, veterans, etc., that need some extra help, and maybe your program or your project is meant to serve those. If any of you, and most of you have driven through Gainesville, just down University, you see in different spots where you would have the opportunity to do programs based on low income or children or minorities or veterans or homeless. And a lot of times those that are homeless, it fits into their low income. They may have children. They may be minorities. And a lot of them, unfortunately, are veterans that have not been able to integrate back into society. So helping them could be, part of what you're doing. There are programs and projects that work specifically in those areas, and grantors that work specifically within those areas that are willing to give funds to those who want to work in it and show that they can have a viable project. A lot, and when I say a lot, I cannot stress enough, there are a lot of initiatives that get started, but they do not get planned out well because someone just says they want to do something. It's not going to be enough to tell a grantor, I want to do this. They want to see that you can, and knowing what you're doing and what population you're going after, who are we helping, what areas, what are we trying to improve, and being passionate about it. That's another thing that we haven't talked a lot about, but being passionate about what you're doing is going to help. And we'll discuss that a little bit more as we move forward after the midterm, when we talk about what you're putting in your writing and stuff. But know those target beneficiaries that they'll be looking at. Know your submission methods. This is something we've talked about several times. It could be online, could be email. They could still use physical mail. What's required documentation that you're going to have, proposals, your narrative, your budget. We're going to spend time talking about the budget later on in the term where we actually build a budget. The organizational financial statements. Do you have financial statements for what you're doing? Sometimes if it's a pilot project with a new organization, there may not be, but you still will likely have some type of financial statements, especially if you're building it up under the umbrella of a charitable work. You're probably going to have some financial statements because you have to keep those filed. You have to file certain financial statements. Letters of support. It's real important when you're doing this on a non-academic setting. All right, so I'm not requiring letters of support for the class, but in a non-academic setting, getting letters from community leaders. And that could be anyone from elected official to the leaders in the community who get people working and up and doing. We have the elected officials that make decisions, but then we have people who are leaders in each community, and they know how to get people up and moving. They know how to rally the troops, so to speak, and get people to do stuff. Those are ones that you would like to get letters from, and they can show support for what you're doing and have a little bit of history about what they do when you submit those letters with it. This is a letter from, so-and-so, and it give a quick detail about them and what they've done, and they're supporting you because they believe in you, that type of thing. So having that support and that function helps, and always pay attention to your deadlines. Unfortunately, even though some of us professors were a little bit easier on late work, when it comes to putting in for a grant or submitting the pieces that go into requesting that grant, those deadlines are going to be normally very hard deadlines, and they may not accept anything late. So you'll need to know if there is any type of late submission. Normally that is spelled out in their directions for the grant and your submission for the grant proposal and application. So pay attention to those things. Read. Can't stress that enough. Read all the information that the granting organization, the grantor, is going to offer you, and then read some more. All right, so read what they don't send out, but what is out there about their funding and what they've done. Find someone who has requested from them some type of testimonial to, see that, what mistakes they may have made that you wouldn't necessarily, end up making. What's their criteria? Some of them use metrics they evaluate. They'll add in your project impact, how feasible is it, the sustainability of it, innovation, and the alignment with their mission. So it always comes down to math. We all asked a question at some point. Maybe some of you didn't, but most of us asked a question at some point when we were learning all the more difficult types of math. When am I ever going to use this again? Well, believe it or not, we use it a lot. And, We have machines and computers and other things that do the math for us for the most part, but it is still there. That there's a score attached to project impact, a score attached to feasibility. In an instance like this where they're asking about these things, they attach a score to it. There may be a rubric that's set up for you to see how it's scored, so you know how it breaks down, and you can kind of build into the rubric just like you would for an assignment you're turning in a class. If there's a rubric for you to go by, okay, well, this is where I get these points from. I get 8 points from this one, 7 points from this. I get 10 points from that. And that part's, the next part's worth 25 for a total of 50 points that, I'm can possibly get. And I need to know that if I, miss one little thing, how bad is that going to hurt? If I start cutting into that one that's worth 10 or that one that's worth 25, I'm losing valuable points. And so you need to know, do they use a rubric to score it? So if my feasibility is good and my project impact or my sustainability may be lacking, I need to up my sustainability. I need to up what I'm doing to ensure that this project or this program can keep moving forward as much as it needs to. A project could be a limited time idea and it could have a set end. There could be a terminal point in a project. If it's a building project, well, that terminal point is going to be when that building is completed. Maybe it's in phases. How do you sustain it to carry on to phase 2 and phase 3? So make sure you understand that. When they're reviewing it, how do they review it? Do they use a group to review it? Do they have an algorithm they use? Unfortunately, a lot of things that we submit that we put, our blood, sweat, and tears into, sometimes when it gets to where it's going, the first review of it is in a program where it's scanned and an algorithm runs through it and gives it a score before anybody else looks at it. So it's important to know how that stuff is reviewed. And then look at their history. It's always good to know what they've done. Annual reports that they have, they'll talk about what they've gave in the past, or some type of grant summaries that they provide. A lot of grantors will give out information on previous awards that they've given out. So it's good to know those. Look at success stories of projects that have been funded previously, learn from those. It's good to know who succeeded. We need to learn from mistakes, but we need to learn from those who succeed. That's why when we study books on management and things on those lines, normally we're looking at successful companies to know what to do right. We don't look at those that have failed to know how to run a business. We look at them as cautionary tales, but we look at success stories to know what to do to make sure our business works or our management style works in the way that it should. And then know their funding amounts. What type of range do they have where the funding is going to fit in between? Does it meet the need, or is it going to be something that's going to be just a partial cover and we need to search for other funding? Your reporting compliance, this is nothing new. We talked about this almost every week, how important it is to know that you're going to have to report to these grantors. You're going to have to give them some type of information. How's it going? If you get to the end of what you were doing, a final report, they may need to audit it. They may want to visit sites. They may want to come see what is going on. Some people can rely just on paper or a screen of information that's submitted. Others want to be hands-on and see where all those numbers and what all those numbers mean on the human side of things. So sometimes it's good to, be aware that whatever you're putting in the information you're submitting, make sure it really and truly lines up to what you're doing. So if they make that visit and they want to come see, you're not having to scramble to try to, just prop it up with something else. You can actually show them this is what we're doing. All right, look at their mission statement. What are their annual strategic plans? And what type of public communications do they have? press releases, official announcements, speeches that the leaders in the granting organization have given, those grantors, and what type of things they talk about. You can tell a lot about a person by the passion they put into a speech. It really and truly gives you an idea of what they're concerned about and what they think about and what they're willing to help with. I've sat under people giving speeches that were just a speech, and I've sat under some that was a very, rah, let's get going type speech that had people wanting to help, had people wanting to get out of their seats, to, move their feet and do something. Know what they're passionate about. If you can watch speeches of the people who are, on the board or making decisions with a grantor or a granting agency, you can really and truly have a good idea of what they're passionate about. Know your budget constraints. There's always funding limits, always some type of maximum minimum amounts that you can request. Never fails. There's always going to be budget constraints on everything you do. You have to plan ahead for those, make some contingency plans, know what their limits are so you can plan that out. The allowable expenses that they have, know the categories of the expenses are eligible and ineligible to cover. When you're working on your budget, you'll need to know that, and so that when you include stuff in your budget, it's what they cover. You can show where other money is going out just to show the need, but do it as not covered by the grant, that type of setup. And the parameters will be given to you on what may be covered and what may not. What type of cost sharing are they expecting you to do? Do you have to match the funds, or is it just contributions from other sources that you can add into here also? So with the project or program grant that you're working with for the class, you're going to show other funds, what funds you have on hand, and other sources of funding that you may be getting money from to show an overall budget, and then have a section for the what if of the money coming in from the grant. All right. So let's look at networking and relationships. I heard someone on the radio, I was listening to Bloomberg, one of their podcasts, and the individual was, he was the first Latino individual who was ever the president and ran a major sports franchise. He was the president of the Coyotes in NHL. They're now in Utah. But he was the president of that, and he was the first of Latin descent who became had that type of role. No one else had ever had it in baseball, football, basketball, or hockey. And he was the first one to get into that. And he used to think that networking was, fake. By going out just trying to make contacts with people, he thought it was fake. He came to realize that networking was something that you make acquaintances, and those acquaintances are someone that you keep in contact with every once in a while, not all the time, but they may be able to help you, or you may be able to help them at some point. So networking and being able to meet other people who are doing the same thing you're doing, that are, on advisory boards, that work in, the industry you're trying to work within, or at least the industry that would surround your program or your project. Make contacts. It's nothing wrong with having a list of contacts that you do not contact every day or even every week. Maybe someone that you just meet once a month, just to go over, ideas and new concepts with what you're doing in your program or your project. Someone to bounce stuff off of. It's always good to have a sounding board. In my careers working within grocery and retail, having a sounding board whether it was an assistant manager that I could talk to, department head, whoever, someone to, okay, like this is what I plan on doing. I want to do this with displays, or I want to do this with, the aisles. Having someone to bounce ideas off of was very helpful because they could give me a perspective that maybe I wasn't looking at. And doing so when it's people who have maybe a differing view of you, but still are willing to listen and give you valid feedback is very important. So, speaking of feedback, what type of feedback do you get? Is feedback going to be provided if it's unsuccessful, your application? That would be good to help you prepare for the next time you apply. There are resubmission policies, continuous improvement, incorporate the feedback they give you into improving future proposals. You understand what feedback is for the most part. It's the same as if you submit an assignment in pieces, kind of like you're going to do after the second half of the semester. We're going to be submitting this assignment in pieces, or during the second half of the semester. That is what you're doing, and it's going to be based on feedback that you get about the items that you're submitting. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about these. There's a couple of those that I do want to point out if I can find the paperwork that I was using for this. If I could find where I had it at. Give me 1 second. Wasn't as far from me as I thought it was. Maybe I don't have it here. Maybe I just had it saved. Well, we're going to just go over this, and I'll put a little bit more information about this out on Canvas. But some of the organizations and foundations that work with grantors and in that type of setting, you have the National Science Foundation. If you're doing research, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, your STEM ideas, it's a big area for where everyone's looking for improvement. Your top money getters, as far as those who are trying to get improvements in an organization, this is kind of where they get those from. They want to see what you're doing with that and how you're building upon it. It funds research and education initiatives in the fields of science technology. The primary goal is to support innovative research that advances knowledge and drives technology progress. It provides grants and cooperative agreements for colleges, universities, K through 12 school systems, businesses, informal science organizations, and other research agencies. So maybe for this assignment, you're not doing research, but that's, one to look at. Then you have things like the Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That is based on health and development and education initiatives around the world. Their goal is to eradicate diseases and enhance health care, reduce poverty, providing quality education opportunities. This is one that's fairly global in what they do. Then you have the Ford Foundation that supports social justice, human rights, and educational opportunities through its funding and initiatives. Notice we've got education opportunities in some form, some shape or form in each one of these. They're supporting school systems with the NSF, the Gates Foundation, Ford Foundation, or the education opportunities, advancing the ability for those who need extra help or may not be fully represented to get the help for education and those type of things. Let's look at a couple more of these. The Andrew Mellon Foundation supports humanities, arts, and higher education. It aims to strengthen institutions' capacities to advance scholarship, foster diversity and inclusion, and promote the public humanities and the arts. All right, then the Rockefeller, Mellon. These are some you see if you watch public broadcasting. These are some of their big sponsors. Rockefeller Foundation works on advancing health, revaluing ecosystems, securing livelihoods, and transforming cities. If your program or your project was to be within a city and trying to improve in a neighborhood, trying to help out, this could be one of the places you look. Alfred P. Sloan is a science-based version of it. The Spencer Foundation is educational research and improvement. The Carnegie Corporation or Carnegie Mellon is where some of this is. You have the Andrew W. Mellon and Carnegie Corporation. You put those together, you have Carnegie Mellon, which is another think tank and a foundation that gives out to different charities or different organizations. But Carnegie is about education, democracy, and knowledge creation and dissemination, helping people learn. Notice that there's a theme in a lot of these. Let's see, Pew Charitable Trust. Probably one of the ones that you hear a lot about. They do a lot of research based items. If it's about environment, public health, and science, they do a lot with it. Their goal is to kind of work behind the scenes and getting government initiatives move forward that will increase the public's awareness of policy. Pew works real strong within legislators, inner circles. They have a focus of getting policy and laws passed that work toward environmental conservation and those type of things. You have the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, provides equitable opportunities for children, families, and communities. Its focus area include education and learning, food security, health equity, racial equity, and community and civic engagement. The foundation works to address disparities and foster opportunities for vulnerable populations. And that sounds like what a lot of you are probably leaning toward with your projects is something to do with that. I've kind of added pieces in over time to gear you toward, I don't want to say manipulated, but I have kind of guided you to certain things to look at. And then when I put out the parameters for what the grant's going to be, when we come back or when we start back after the midterm, you'll have a good idea of what I'm talking about when it comes to these different foundations and some of the stuff that we've done. All right, so that's going to do it for this week.